In this video, we'll be going over how to find the transformations and how to perform transformations of a cosine graph. So, when looking at a sine equation, you'll see y equals a sine, parentheses b, parentheses x minus d, parentheses plus c. And for cosine, you'll often see y equals a cosine, parentheses b, parentheses x minus d plus c. And you may be asking yourself, what does the a mean? What does the b mean? What does the d mean? What does the c mean? And so the a, b, and c will be listed right below here.
Your amplitude, also known as your vertical stretch or compression. Your b value is your horizontal stretch or compression. Your c value is the vertical shift up or down. Your d value is the horizontal shift left or right.
These are a few steps in order to find or properly graph a cosine or sine sinusoidal. So first is to get all the values like a, b, c, and d, mark the period, the phase shift, then you plot the max and the min points on the y-axis, you plot the period, then you plot the phase shift. Step 6 depends on the type of equation, and then 7, finally you just connect the dots. I would suggest writing all these steps in your journal or your notes in order to remember them for future reference.
Now we are going to do an example using cosine. This example is going to be y equals 3 cosine of x plus 5 pi over 6. Now let's go back to our steps. First, we want to label all our values, which are our a, b, c, and d. So we have a, b, c, and d. So our a value is going to be 3, which is the coefficient of our cosine. B value is going to be the coefficient of x. In this scenario, we can just assume it's 1 because there's nothing in front of the x. So we have 1.
Based on the equation, we have no c value, and the d value is negative 5 pi over 6, since the base is x minus d, and we have a positive, so it becomes a negative.
And we said our next step was to find all the values. Now we need to get the period and phase shift. So let's start out with the period. We said the period is 2 pi over our b value for sine and cosine. Our b value was 1, so it's 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. So our period is 2 pi. Next, we need to find the phase shift. We're just going to call it PS for right now, just to make it simple and easy. And PS, as we said, is equal, making this parenthesis equal 0. So in this scenario, it's x plus 5 pi over 6 equals 0. And subtract 5 pi over 6 from both sides, which leaves us with x equals negative 5 pi over 6, meaning that our phase shift, which is essentially our x, is negative 5 pi over 6. Now that we have this, we can now go ahead and graph. But before we go and graph, let's just write this out. Cosine is max, or cosine goes through the max. It starts with the max, goes to the origin, goes to the min, goes back to the origin, goes to the max, and then back to the origin, and then to the min, and then so on and so forth. If it was negative cosine, it would be from the min. It would start out at the min, go to the origin, go to the max, back to the origin, and so on and so forth. Now we are going to go ahead and graph the cosine function y equals 3 cosine of x plus 5 pi over 6. And so we need to start out with going back to our steps. We want to label all our values, which we just did. We found out our period and phase shift. Now we want to plot our max and our min values.
We have a phase shift of negative 5 pi over 6, meaning that the graph would start at negative 5 pi over 6 as its first x value. So to make it look, the graph would look something like this, where we would have an extension and we'd have a first point at negative 5 pi over 6 as our first x value.
But we want to get our max and our min.
When calculating the max and min value, we just do c plus a for max and
now
c minus a for the
max
minimum
value, which is just going to be 0 plus our a value, which is 3, meaning our max is at 3 on the y-axis, and our min value is going to be 0 minus 3, which is negative 3, which is our minimum value. So let's just plot those 2 points on the graph. So we have a max of 3, min of negative 3. And now we want to first plot our first point, or after our period, And again, we're going to do the same thing, similar to what we did to sine, which was going to be phase shift. Phase, I'm just going to put an S, H. Phase shift plus our period equals one of our points. And so phase shift was negative 5 pi over 6 plus our period, which was 2 pi. So we have negative 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi, which is actually just negative 5 pi over 6 plus 12 pi over 6, which is just positive 7 pi over 6, which is going to be one of our points. Positive 7 pi over 6. All right. So now we're going to do the same method where we do p over 4 to get our points. So p over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is just pi over 2, or just 1/2, or just 1/2 pi. So now we're going to do our phase shift plus our point. Our phase shift is going to be our first point, essentially. So we have negative 5 pi over 6 plus pi over 2, or 1/2. And in this scenario, that's just going to be 3 pi over 6, which gives us negative 2 pi over 6, which is actually just negative pi over 3, or 1/3, negative 1/3 pi. So our second point would be right here at negative pi over 3. And again, we are not really graphing those points since they're not on our graph. We're going to add another 1/2, so which is going to be another 3 pi over 6, leaving us with pi over 6, which is going to be the first point we have on our actual graph, our x value. So then we're going to add another 1/2, which gives us 2 pi over 3. It's going to be another point of ours, 2 pi over 3. And if we add another 1/2, so another 1/2, we get that 7 pi over 6, which is what we have right now after we added our radian to our phase shift. So now we have a total of, let's just count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 points before our period. And now we can actually graph. So basically, we are not really minding it for the points before the graph, but for this scenario, we are going to try to graph them. So again, we said that cosine starts at the maximum, goes to the origin, it goes to the minimum, and then back to the origin. So our maximum here is 3, then we go to the origin, which is right here at 0. We go to our minimum at pi over 6, which is negative 3. Then we go to back to the origin, which is at 2 pi over 3. Then we go to the maximum, which is at 7 pi over 6, comma 3. You can connect the dots. So you go max, origin, min, origin, max. We go back to the origin. So we add another 1/2 to 7 pi over 6, so 7 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6 gives us 5 pi over 3, because 10 pi over 6 simplifies down to 5 pi over 3. So we have 5 pi over 3, and so we can graph that. And then we're going back to our origin, so we're just going to connect sort of like that. And again, I'm so sorry for this terrible graphing. We're just going to be graphing like that and going there. Then we're going to go to our minimum. Our minimum, again, 13 pi over. So we're going to add another half, which is another 3 pi over 6, to the 10 pi over 6, which gives us 13 pi over 6. Our next point is here. We go to our minimum, and we connect the dots. And then you just continue this pattern. So 13 pi over 6, and then you get 16 pi over 6, which is just 8 pi over 4, which is just 8 pi over 3. So you'd go back to the origin. And then you would add another 1/2, which would give you 19 pi over 6, and you would go back to your maximum, back up, and then back to the minimum at 22 pi over 6, which simplifies down to 11 pi over 3. So it'd be like that, like this. And then you go back to the min, and so on and so forth. Well, this is the way you have to graph cosine and sine. It's a long process, but it's what we need to do. I hope this video helped, and if you believe it did, please consider to like and subscribe, and feel free to rewind any part of this video.